Good evening and welcome to the February 16th, 2016 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to invite several Cub Scout troops, Troop 1429, 1304, and 1220, to come up to the podium. Everyone please rise and they will lead us through the pledge. Someone should be by the mic.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. Next on our agenda is reflection, and I'd like to have a moment of silence and remind everyone that our friend and colleague Henry Marafa is at home convalescing and hopefully getting better from his bout with leukemia. Thank you very much. Next, we have approval of minutes, and tonight we have one set of minutes to approve. It's from the regular meeting of January 4th. What is the pleasure of the council?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 3-0. Plus, we got an extra vote from the audience. Excellent. And next, we have appointments. We have appointments to several committees. What is the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I move a resolution of the council confirming your appointments and reappointments to the Economic Business and Business Development Committee for a 2-year term. Jeffrey Hines, his term to expire February 2018. To the Old Town Advisory Subcommittee, 2-year terms for James McNulty and Jeff Fuller, terms to expire February 2018. To the Animal Control Board, a 3-year term, reappointment to Victor Katz, term to expire February 2019. To a reappointment to the Economic and Business Development Committee, a 2-year term, Colleen Seco, February 2018. To the Multicultural Affairs Committee, a 2-year term, Washington and Sango, term to expire February 2018. To the Senior Advisory Committee, Henry Harris, term to expire February 2018. To the Transportation Committee, Carol Berger and Joseph Allen, terms to expire February 2018. That's it.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 3-0 plus another from the audience. Do we have anybody whose names we just read in the audience? I know we have a few. Please rise if you... Okay, we have Jim McNulty. Please introduce yourself and tell us the committee that you were just appointed to.
My name is Jim McNulty, and I was just appointed to the Old Town Advisory Subcommittee.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeffrey Hines, just appointed to the Economic Development Committee.
Excellent. Anybody else? Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you guys so much. Joining one of our committees is an excellent way to get involved and to give back to our community. We really appreciate it. Next, we have presentations, and this first one is the Employee Recognition Awards, and City Manager Tomasello is going to lead us.
Thank you, Mayor. Always a pleasure to do this honor. If I could have Sarah Fleming come up. Sarah was nominated for creative work and outstanding leadership in planning and coordinating the city employee picnic at Seneca Creek State Park. Thank you, Doris. Sarah led, which is generous. Sarah did all the work in planning and organizing the event, which was a great success. We had not had a picnic at the park before. We may not again. We're not really sure where we're going to go next year. I know it was a big, big hit, and all the employees appreciated her work tremendously. Thank you very much. Our second award is for the fourth quarter team recognition, which will be a little different. If I could get Lauren Klingler to come up. There she is. And if City Attorney Lynn Ward would come down. The winner of the fourth quarter team recognition award is the city elections team. Consisted entirely of Lynn Ward and Lauren Klingler. They were nominated for their outstanding work ethic and the courteous and professional manner in which they interacted with the general public, with city staff, Montgomery County's Board of Elections, and the other outside agencies and organizations. Individually and as a team, they both have set a high standard for conducting the city's election throughout the years. It is a lot of work behind the scenes. They don't just happen. It's very complicated. There's lots of reporting that has to be kept up with. And I watch them do their regular job from outside my office all the time and add this every 2 years. And this year we had 7 candidates, so it was quite an undertaking. They made sure that all aspects of the elections were handled in a timely and efficient manner, and they were conducted in complete compliance with both state and local statutes. And it's about time these two were recognized for the great job that they did.
Okay. Next, we have our update on the 2016 legislative session, and I'd like to call Monica Marquina and Rob Garagiola to the podium.
Good evening. I'm here today to introduce Rob Garagiola, who will be providing the 2016 mid-session report on the legislative session.
Great. I'm going to have Maura.
And Maura Moynihan, of course, from Alexander.
Right. Welcome, Maura.
Great, thank you. Mayor, council members, how are we all doing this evening?
All right.
All right, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
So there's a number of things going on in Annapolis, obviously, and we want to touch on your priorities as well as some of the other things that are going on as well. Again, Rob Garagiola with Alexander and Cleaver, Maura Moynihan also with Alexander and Cleaver. And for the last month and a half now, we've kind of been point and working with Monica and many of you on a range of issues. Some of the kind of primary focus things that we've been dealing with, and I'll just kind of go down the list as was presented to us. The first item being full restoration of the highway user revenue money. As you know, there's legislation. The governor's put forward a proposal as well. We have both Senator King along with Senator Doug Peters. Nancy King has been a very good friend of the city's over the years. Doug Peters is a former municipal elected official from the city of Bowie. Is also on the Budget and Tax Committee. And there are probably about a dozen or so, I want to say, senators that are co-sponsoring legislation to increase the highway user revenue fund for municipalities incrementally over the next several years. Looking at fiscal year 17, getting it in statute at $30 million, and then increasing it steadily to $50 million. There's a cross-file to that legislation in the House. Delegate Pam Beidel and Ann Healy, two strong leaders, one from Anne Arundel County, one from Prince George's County, so you've got geographic diversity, which is good also when moving legislation forward. The hearings are coming up. We have next week in the House and in the Senate the following week on March 1st. So March 1st is the Senate one, and in the House the hearing is going to be on March 25th. I would say on that legislation, there's a lot of talk, I would say, in both parties, Republican and Democrat, in the legislature as well as the governor, about doing something on this, advancing it forward. We're in conversations with a lot of folks, including the presiding officers, on this issue. It's not only a priority for the city of Gaithersburg, but MML and other municipalities throughout the state. We're working in tandem with a lot of those folks as well to try to have a strong concerted effort to move this legislation forward. We think it goes a long way. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that as well, if there are any questions on that particular piece of legislation before we move to the next item.
No, go right ahead.
Okay. Do you want to touch on the school construction funding and just kind of give an overview on that?
Sure. Senator Nancy King has a bill in that would increase the school construction grant program to $40 million, which I think represents a 50% increase. In the next year, Montgomery County would be qualified to receive $5.9 million, and then local school systems in Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Howard, Montgomery, and Prince George's are eligible to receive and share in the extra $20 million if this bill passes, beginning in fiscal year 2017. So the bill has been heard but not voted on in the Senate, and is scheduled to be heard later this month in the House.
As you know, she's the subcommittee chair dealing with education issues and is a really strong leader on this.
Absolutely.
Any questions on that before I move to the next thing?
Nope. Go right ahead.
All right. The other issue deals with the distance restrictions regarding alcohol licenses, and there was local legislation specifically to Gaithersburg, and there's also countywide legislation. As you may know, the countywide legislation has passed the House delegation, the 24-member delegation, and is going to be in the House Economic Matters Committee. I don't know if we have a date for that yet. Monday. Okay, that's right, Monday. As you know, Delegate Barkley chairs the subcommittee in House Economic Matters. At this point, we don't see any issues with that. Once it clears there, the Senate delegation, the 8-member Senate delegation, would need to still vote on this to move it through the corresponding committee in the Senate. We're not hearing any issues on that, but again, on all these issues, I would say daily now, we're touching different legislators on these. So we're going to continue to do that as this advances, continue to touch folks in the Economic Matters Committee, particularly from Montgomery County, and Delegate Barkley we've been speaking to regularly on this. To the extent there's any issues that come up, we'll bring that to your attention. But at present, we see that legislation moving forward. But again, we'll stay on top of that as well.
Rob, I do have a question on that.
Sure.
Is this, I know Cheryl Kagan was dropping one that was local to us, really, to a specific zone in our code. The one you're talking about here is the countywide one.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
So they decided, the delegation, to move the countywide one. My understanding is that it addresses the issues that we were seeking with Senator Kagan's legislation as well.
Okay, great.
And it appears that that's moving forward, but again, there's a long session ahead of us still, and we'll continue to stay on top of that.
Okay.
Bond bill, you want to touch on that?
Sure. Our bond bill sponsors are Senator Cheryl Kagan and Chairman Kumar Barve. We've got in a bond bill for $300,000 to help restore and renovate the Old Town Park Plaza. Bond bill Saturday is March 12th, so I know there will be some representatives from the city. Rob and I will be there also to help testify, and we'll be talking to members of both budget committees to make sure we can secure that funding for you.
Great.
All right, and then moving on to an issue that probably in the fall was not necessarily front and center at the time due to changes in the transportation CTP that appear to have occurred in the month of December, dealing with specifically the Watkins Mill interchange. And both of us know that this is a huge priority for the city, and we're very active. I know we've had some meetings with you, with Secretary Pete Ron, the Transportation Secretary. We know there's going to be additional meetings tomorrow with State Highway. There's a lot going on this front, and obviously we're focusing a lot of attention on it on your behalf as well. This Friday, the Montgomery County delegation is doing a briefing on this issue. Already, the Montgomery County delegation has provided a letter to the Department of Transportation
on this being a priority for them. We've had conversations, I've had conversations with multiple conversations with County Executive Ike Leggett. So we know the county is actively engaged on this, as well as Councilman Roger Berliner and their lobbyist Mel Wanger. So there's good communication going on there, and I'm probably talking to them a couple times a week and trying to coordinate effort and voice on that. I would say it's almost daily now that we're engaging with legislative leaders, not only in our delegation, in seeking to maintain and elevate this. It is obviously for the District 17 and 15 and 39 legislators who represent the city of Gaithersburg, but also the surrounding areas of Gaithersburg, those legislators in those 3 delegations. But we're also seeking to elevate it among the other 5 delegations in Montgomery County. We're really trying to make this be, for Montgomery County, what Prince George's Hospital is and has been in Prince George's County, and Baltimore City education funding has been in Baltimore City. So we're seeing kind of the tempo rising with the legislature, which is good. I was in Senator King's office today. There's legislation that's being drafted. It hasn't come back yet, and it interestingly is going to be Senator Brian Feldman. He's agreed to introduce the legislation to essentially mandate funding for this. I would say realistically, it's not a foregone conclusion that this legislation is necessarily going to move forward, but it's going to be a coalescing tool to get members of the delegation engaged on the issue, and then Delegate Resnick, who recently has transferred duty assignments to the Appropriations Committee. So he's actually in a very critical place and can be a strong ally. He's going to be doing legislation on the House side. In addition to that, we've had conversations with the staff of the presiding officers, and we're seeking to elevate the issue with them. So again, they kind of see this is Montgomery County's big, issue that we need to move forward this year. We recognize the emphasis about how important it is to the city, how important it is from an economic development perspective, how important it is from a jobs perspective, how important it is from a tax base perspective, obviously not only for the city, but the county and the state. In addition to all that, there's been some communication already with Secretary David Brinkley, who's the budget secretary. There's nexus for him to be engaged in this. We're also seeking to sit down with Secretary Mike Gill, Secretary of Commerce, because of the economic and jobs aspect of this. And then I've had, and I know Maura has as well as other members of our team, in addition to the meeting that we attended with you, with Secretary Pete Ron and State Highway, we've had multiple discussions with them in the intervening, 2 weeks or so since we had that meeting, and we continue to engage with them in Annapolis, and ideally we'll sit down with them again in the not-too-distant future. And then finally, to close out on that, we're working on a date. We're trying to sit down also. I've had, I would say, cursory discussions, but I want to have a more thorough discussion with the governor's chief of staff and some members that many say, his second floor staff. So basically his advisors, his chief of staff, his deputy chief of staff. So we're really elevating this, to all corners of the state. There's a long way to go on it, but there's a lot that's being done, and we know that you're actively engaged and involved on this issue as well.
Great. I mean, we're certainly, we can go on all night about how involved we've been on this.
Absolutely.
In the intervening time since our meeting with Secretary Ron, I was in front of him 2 additional times. Once with Ike and Nancy Florine and Sidney Katz and Roger Berliner. This is our top priority at the moment. Not to downgrade any of the others, but this is huge for us, and I think you guys understand that.
Yeah, I would say, it's pretty much a not only just daily, but multiple touches a day that we're doing with different legislators or folks in the executive branch, as well as coordinating, and having discussions with the county government as well, and just trying to do a full court press on this issue.
Yeah, great.
Well, actually, I think given our concerns and how significant and important this, both the infrastructure impact and the economic development impact of this project is to everything else that we want to do, including restoring the highway user revenue and revenues that are going to result in funds available for school construction. In the 10 years I've been on the council, we've never reorganized our priorities, but I would say this should probably be our #1 legislative priority this year. And if we do that, we should put out a press release that we've rearranged our legislative priorities to make sure that everybody knows this is #1 for the city as well as for the county. That's what I propose that we do. I think all of these issues are important. All of them are important. This is probably the one that's driving most of what we've been trying to do in the city for a long time. So that's my suggestion.
Just to echo that, Councilman, there's, in addition to the issues we covered tonight, there are a lot of other issues that we've been working very closely with Monica on, and tracking and going over with her and figuring out kind of tactically what makes the most sense for the city of Gaithersburg. We recognize that this is a big deal, this project. And as I said, not only Maura and myself from Alexander and Kleberg, we've got other people on our team getting involved in this because we recognize how important this is to the city.
Thank you. If anybody else wants to add anything, otherwise we'll let them go on.
No, I will.
Go ahead.
I'll just say quickly to add to what's already been said. Obviously, as soon as the city became aware of this apparent change or tentative change, we certainly mobilized not only your shop, and we appreciate all that you've been doing and that you continue to do, and we know you won't rest until we get there. Obviously, the incredible circling of the wagons that we've seen, not only with the unanimity of our mayor and council, but when we reached out to the county, the unanimity of the county council and the county executive, and when we reached out to the county delegation representing all the different districts in Montgomery County, the unanimity of all those delegates and senators in writing very strongly worded letters to the administration about this issue. I think it really reflects the fact that this is the big #1 issue, and that we'll continue to treat it that way for the rest of session, and we'll stay optimistic that we'll be able to make progress because of the unanimity of support throughout the city and the county on this.
And I'll just echo what Mike said. I think this is the city's #1 priority right now, and I think we should put the full weight. To the extent we haven't already done so, just keep putting more weight behind it. Question I've got for you is, you'd mentioned Senator Feldman's bill legislation as well as Delegate Resnick's legislation, and you had, I think you commented that you're not sure where it's going to go. Is there a sense that outside of the immediate jurisdictions touching Gaithersburg, the county as well is supporting, but other jurisdictions, is this even on their radar?
So it's I would say kind of a two-pronged strategy. One is continued engagement with the Hogan administration, and then where can we bring in pressure points from the legislature. While they're in session, they've got greater leverage. The Senate President introduced legislation because the governor didn't provide funding for Prince George's Hospital. Again, he's the Senate President and been serving in that role for 30 plus years, but that precipitated a discussion that brought a deal together essentially. I worked when I was in the Senate with a prior council and a prior mayor when former Secretary Flanagan in the Ehrlich administration sought to close some of our MARC stations. In that instance, legislation was begun to move forward, but it precipitated a discussion. So what I meant by my comment with respect to Senator Feldman's legislation, and he's an adjacent district, has constituency that comes to Gaithersburg, will use that interchange, et cetera. He also chairs a transportation policy subcommittee. So there's a strong, he's a strong candidate or legislator for that reason to be leading on this. And while it may not be at the end of the day that legislation moves forward and we get in statute, this project must go forward. My hope is that at worst is it becomes a focal point, because there will be bill hearings on this legislation, and it can become a focal point for legislators in the entire delegation, as well as county government and city government, frankly, to really make the case and put pressure on the administration to come to some kind of resolve why they have the ability. Now, session, we're at day, I want to say 35, 34, somewhere in that ballpark, so we've got another, was that 55?
Two-thirds.
Yeah, 2/3. Math is not my forte, but that's still an eternity of time. A little less than 2 months. It's an eternity of time, and a lot can happen, and a lot can shift. It could be that we get a breakthrough with the administration in some of these meetings we're doing, and the legislation can get withdrawn. It could be that the legislation starts to get legs and potentially starts moving through committees to put pressure. So we've got to kind of adapt as things on the ground are changing. But to me, it is an important vehicle to kind of bring focus to this issue and rally the delegation around it. They're aware of it. They're informed about it. But there's 3,000 bills that have been introduced. There's a lot of other distractions on them. There may be issues in their respective local areas of the county. We want this to be such a focal point, and we think that the legislation is a good vehicle for that.
Now, before you guys go on, I just want to explain to anybody in the public who really doesn't understand what we're talking about. This is the Watkins Mill interchange. This is a potential, a new interchange on I-270 at Watkins Mill Road that's been in planning for 15 to 20 years, that was fully funded, fully designed, and shovel-ready to break ground this summer. And the state had actually gone out to bid and for the contractor to actually build this interchange. And at the last minute, the 11th hour, they decided to pull the project off the table to study it as part of a larger study to reduce congestion on I-270. So right now the project's in limbo, and there's a lot riding on it for the city, so it's very important to us. So just in case people here didn't understand what we're
There's
talking
a lot,
And
not just the city.
folks from the city hearing this and folks outside the city hearing this should feel free to contact their legislators at the state and contact the governor's administration and let them know that you strongly support the full interchange.
There you go. Your call to action. Okay.
A couple other things that we wanted to touch on. There's the stormwater legislation as well. And we have Delegate Gilchrist in the House has introduced legislation on that. The hearing is March 2nd. Senator Ron Young, who's on the counterpart committee in the Senate, is also former mayor of Frederick, so gets these issues from a municipal standpoint. The hearing there is on March 1st. We've got both those bill hearings coming up in about 2 weeks. We feel two good sponsors for that, and we're going to continue to be actively engaged with those committees and pushing that legislation forward as well.
I did have a question about that one because a week or two ago, Monica and I were in Annapolis, and we took the opportunity together with MML to testify in support of Delegate Carr's more limited bill with amendments. The strategy being that while we had no strong feelings one way or the other with respect to Delegate Carr's limited bill, we thought it was a good opening to have a broader debate about this issue, and that broader debate is encapsulated well in the bill put forward by Delegate Gilchrist and Senator Young, so I'm glad to see that moving forward. My understanding is that MML supports that bill, just voted Saturday to support that bill, and so MML will be putting its resources toward support of that. But I just did want to express my concern after having visited the Environment and Transportation Committee and discussed these issues in front of the committee. Many members of the committee are very good on these issues, and maybe they are just sort of saturated. I guess that's a bad pun on a stormwater bill, but by this issue after having done some comprehensive legislation in the last session or two. But I was frankly concerned that a couple of the members of that committee didn't quite get what was going on with respect to the different layers of government jurisdictions and who's paying the stormwater to whom and why.
Exactly.
And that's a real concern, and so I'm glad to see we have another opportunity to advocate for this new bill. But I think we have some work to do in educating some of the members of that committee about exactly why it's fair for the federal government and the state government and the county government to be paying the stormwater fee on property they own that is within the city limits, since we are paying the fee on municipal government property out of our own budget, and all of our private citizens and property owners, whether they be residents, commercial properties, or nonprofits, are paying their fee. All, of course, which is mandated by federal and state law so that we can protect our Chesapeake Bay, seems to make sense that they should do their part if they're requiring us to do our part. So I appreciate the work you're doing on this, and I hope we'll continue to educate a couple of those members of that committee.
Well, as you mentioned, it's a fairness issue, and both these bills are statewide, so it's not specific to Montgomery County or Montgomery County municipalities. This is something that affects all municipalities throughout the state, and we think, as you mentioned, this is going to be a good mechanism to furthering that education process, and ideally it can lead to some fairness for municipalities throughout the state, inclusive of Gaithersburg.
Great.
All right. You want to touch on this issue here?
Sure. I'm sure you guys are all aware of the local income tax allocation issue. There was a briefing in the Senate Budget and Tax Committee a few weeks ago where the comptroller explained his plan to bring in a third-party auditor to make a full assessment of where the errors are and who owes what to whom, and believes that there's a path forward where the state can reimburse the county and then potentially put together a payment plan. And he's really been speaking in very broad strokes about that. So we do have legislation. Senator Cheryl Kagan is a co-sponsor of a bill to require the comptroller to reimburse the county or municipality for any underpayments from the local reserve account. It would also require that the county or municipality who receive an overpayment pay the account back after a full accounting of tax returns for the taxer in question. So we're going to be working closely with the comptroller and keeping an eye on this legislation to make sure that the solution is fair and equitable and comes to a provident resolution for the city of Gaithersburg.
Okay. So just in case anybody isn't aware of this issue, every year when we file our state income taxes, all the money goes into the comptroller's office, and then a percentage of it, a fixed percentage, is allocated back to Montgomery County, and a fixed percentage is allocated back to the city of Gaithersburg. What we found out earlier this year, maybe it was late last year, that the comptroller's office believes that they've misallocated and sent more of the money that should have gone to the county has come to Gaithersburg and to the other municipalities within Montgomery County, and in some form or other, we're going to have to pay that money back for that mistake. So at this point, we're not aware of how large an amount this will be or what the terms will be. So that's what these good people are working on for us. And we're working on it as well.
Taking a fair amount of heat over this as well, as you can imagine.
Yes.
The only other issue that we thought we would cover, and then of course we're happy to address any other issues as well.
Sure.
Is Delegate Platt's legislation regarding a task force looking at extending mass transit, Shady Grove Metro north through Frederick. There's support for it, obviously, in Upper Montgomery County and in the Frederick community. I'm not sure. I know there's a hearing coming up. I want to say actually it's March 10th. I don't think there's a Senate cross-file at this point.
No.
And I don't have the impression presently that this legislation has legs to move forward. I think it's an important discussion to be having. I think the hearing will serve that function. But at present, I don't necessarily see that legislation moving forward. And if it's something that we wanted to focus any energy on, a direction would be helpful on that as well.
Well, mass transit would be a boon to the Up County, as well as connecting Frederick to the large employment centers in D.C. and Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and even Northern Virginia. It may, I think, to many, it would seem like this discussion is 50 years late, but it's probably important to have it anyway, since we're still in major activity centers and growth centers in the Metro D.C. area that extends all the way beyond Frederick. So a task force to look at the impacts and benefits of a project like this probably needs to be done at some point, whether it involves extending the actual metro from Shady Grove, or whether it involves some kind of connection to the same rails that Mark uses. Then that needs to be discussed. So
And I agree.
I think we need to have that discussion at some point.
I agree in general. However, if it takes one bit of energy away from Watkins Mill interchange,
Wait till next year.
yeah.
We'll wait till next year. But that's why, the interchange is important for that very reason. The reason we have to have it is because we don't have the transit that we
Exactly.
need. And this doesn't diminish the need for the Watkins Mill interchange, but it actually would point to greater benefits that we get from it by building it now and then looking at extending light rail or some kind of public mass transit.
Any other comments on this?
I have a comment on
Go
another
ahead.
issue.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to raise another issue. I don't know that it's was raised in a timely enough fashion to get any traction this year, but I had some discussions with Delegate Platt about it recently. Last year, when the General Assembly passed a comprehensive state False Claims Act, which is pretty big new legislation for the state, mirroring the federal False Claims Act. And for those who don't know, the idea is to allow private citizens on behalf of the state and local governments to go after government contractors and vendors who essentially defraud us and misuse taxpayer dollars and don't deliver the products and the services that they promise to be delivering under their contracts with the government. It's an important piece of legislation for good governance and for protecting the taxpayer dollar, except there was something missing from the state legislation, which is it did not include municipalities. It did give the authority to go after False Claims Act violators who violate misuse county dollars as well as state dollars, but it didn't include municipal dollars. And I think it was just an oversight. I don't think it was anything intentional, but I think it was an oversight in the drafting of that legislation. And I thought you could make a pretty easy fix by just having an amendment bill to add municipalities to this legislation to allow us as a municipality and citizens on behalf of the municipality to go after folks who are violating those rules. So I spoke with him about it, but I think we missed the bill introduction deadline this year. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I think maybe, I don't know, he was starting to work on it. I don't know if he got it out of legislative drafting in time or not. But if he didn't, then it's something to look at for next year because I think it's a fairly uncontroversial, easy fix that gives us another important tool to protect the taxpayer's dollar. So just keep that on your radar screen.
Anything from anyone else? Okay, so thank you guys for all your hard work and all that you're doing for us. The next item on our agenda is public comments. I suspect there may be one or two that have comments related to what we just talked about. So if you guys want to hang around just for a couple
Oh,
minutes.
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This is time for public comments. This is the time where the mayor and council would like to hear from anyone who'd like to speak on any topic that is not a public hearing topic. Tonight we have one public hearing. So if you're here to speak on that, then just hold on. We're going to get to that next. We ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. When you have 30 seconds left, the timer will beep and turn yellow, and when your time's up, it'll beep and turn red. We ask that you state your name, and you can state your address, or if you don't feel comfortable, state your neighborhood, and who would like to be our first speaker. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Tomasello, members of council. For those who missed it earlier, my name is Jim McNulty, and I'm the president of the Saybrook Homeowners Association. I represent 478 households on the easternmost border of the city. I wanted to take the opportunity tonight to thank you for my appointment to the subcommittee, but I also wanted to thank Mr. Mumpower and the city for your assistance in finally getting the new traffic pattern activated at the intersection of Mid-County Highway and Saybrook Oates Boulevard. We ask your continued assistance to expedite removing the island on which the old traffic light pole still sits. Until that is removed, drivers have to make a very wide right turn onto Saybrook Oaks and are at risk for being rear-ended by drivers who don't realize that that is a turn-only lane. I'm also here tonight, along with a number of other Saybrook homeowners, to publicly press for a target date for resolving the parking issues along and surrounding Victory Farm Drive, a topic that we have been discussing with the city behind the scenes for many months. Among the specific resolutions I'd like to suggest are banning overnight parking on Victory Farm Drive inside the Saybrook theme fence and or instituting a zoned permit parking on the streets surrounding Victory Farm Drive. Currently, overnight parking is banned in the parking lot at Kelly Park, which is adjacent to Saybrook. I assume for many of the same reasons that we are requesting no overnight parking on Victory Farm. Our request isn't simply due to the lack of available parking spots, but rather the quality of life issues that are arising from individuals who are parking there and have no vested interest in the surrounding neighborhood. Over the past 6 months, the volume of non-resident cars has pushed beyond Victory Farm on some of the more surrounding streets, including Saybrook View, Oxley Square, Lavenham, Fairgrove Terrace, and Bristol Downs. There are others here tonight who will speak to the specific issues that have arisen, including threats to some of our neighbors. Our community realizes that events at Kelly Park often require parking to spill over into surrounding areas, into the streets. And we're all happy to be good neighbors. And in general, those utilizing the park have not been an issue. However, many of the drivers that are using Saybrook as their own personal park and ride are creating quality of life issues for the homeowners who border these streets. Councilman Marafa and Spiegel saw the park and ride affect themselves when they visited us back in end of October. That's why among our suggestions is to implement a neighborhood-specific zone permit parking within a reasonable area around Victory Farm Drive. City Code Section 14-17A allows for the establishment of permit parking by the city manager or his designee when the use of the streets within residential areas are overburdened due to government action that results in, among other things, quote, interference with the use and enjoyment of private property. We respectfully submit that the government action prohibiting the use of the parking lot at Kelly Park for overnight parking is partly responsible for the overflow into Saybrook and therefore qualifies for the conditions set forth in the code. Victory Farm Drive passes through the heart of our neighborhood, and it's a snow emergency route. During the blizzard, the city...
How much more do you have, Jim?
5 seconds.
Go ahead.
During the blizzard, the city was unable to plow curb to curb, and there were no fewer than 9 vehicles that were left there during the snow emergency. This is a public hazard. We respectfully request that the city publicly set forth a timeline to rectify this issue. Myself and other members of the Saybrook community would be happy to be a part of any conversation that's needed so that we can ensure that our residents have these quality of life issues resolved. And we thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Who'd like to be the next
Could
speaker?
I just ask a question and maybe a comment on that?
Go ahead.
Jim, first, congratulations on your reappointment.
Thank you, Councilman.
Is there a sense from your community as to whether or not a zoning permit is wanted by the community? Because it does have its own burdens.
Yes, we've been talking about this issue for the better part of 6 to 12 months. It would be my preference to not have to burden a large amount of our community. However, the homeowners that are directly dealing with the issues, we're looking for options. You know, we want to put as many options on the table that will help solve this. It's not the parking itself. It's the fact that people come and they throw trash in yards and their car alarms go off at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's nobody to turn them off because they don't live there. There are people that leave their employer's vehicle marked. There's a plumbing or 2 or 3 plumbing trucks that are there overnight. Nobody in our neighborhood works for them, but they're using that street as a park and ride. And, you know, there are places in the district that are, you know, zoned for certain neighborhoods. You know, I can drive there and I can park and do what I want and leave, but it prevents people from leaving it all day, or the folks that don't live in Saybrook from leaving all day, or being out till 2 in the morning drinking. These are the problems that we've been having, and we are looking at any and all options so that our neighbors don't have to deal with this. They shouldn't have to deal with this.
What about parking restrictions during the day, which would get rid of the park and ride folks? Is that something that's been discussed? Or
You know,
We would
we're
love to
open-
have
we're
an
open to
agenda. We
ideas.
would love to have it on the agenda, and we'd be happy to discuss any and all options that would be on the table.
And then the comment I had was, you know, the island that you talked about, the old traffic pattern on Mid-County onto Saybrook Oaks Boulevard. I've heard complaints from the Saybrook's community about that as well. I expressed the concern to Ollie, who then went to the state highway administration who's responsible for that particular construction, and he is aware of it and he has looked into it. Perhaps it's time for him to look into it again, because I noticed they did update the new light signals today when I was over
Yes,
there.
they went up this past week. We were very excited. So it's just that last piece. And what ended up happening was when they made the improvements to the intersection, there used to be a yield lane. So you used to be able to turn to the right, and then there was this island with the pole. And now they've made a new curb, and they just have to take that piece out, so then it's not this ridiculous hard 90-degree turn.
I've gone over the curb.
Oh, have you? Okay.
So I
So you're
understand
very
what you're
well
talking about.
Thank you, Councilman.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Who'd like to be the next speaker? Come on up, please. If we have other speakers, feel free to line up behind this gentleman.
Alrighty. Hi there. I'm
Hi.
Steve Shapiro. I'm Vice President on the board of Saybrook Homeowners Association. And I'm here to just kind of piggyback with what Jim was saying and give some further credence to your question about do we have the backing of the neighborhood to go into maybe a permit parking situation. We're thinking about not the entire neighborhood, but just the areas that would be impacted by saying there's no overnight parking on Victory Farm, because we think it's just going to move. We've talked about this, where it just moves the problem. So if you go to the no overnight parking on Victory Farm, then people are going to start moving into the neighborhood, and that's where we would say that the permit parking might come into effect. But one of the things I wanted to also talk about is the parking that does exist on Victory Farm right now, and as good a job that the city did on clearing the snow from our big snowstorm, we as a community were a little disappointed in what went on Victory Farm. As you know, Victory Farm is a snow emergency route. There was a snow emergency declared. Maybe that should have been declared a little earlier, so those cars could have been notified and then towed. But no cars were towed. No cars that I know of were ticketed until way after the snow event. What was done is a little green sticker was put on some windows that says, this vehicle is parked in a street designated no parking during snow emergency. All right, well, thank you for putting that sticker on the car, but it doesn't do anything. There's no consequences to their actions, okay? Lynn was nice enough to go out and take some pictures. I'm just going to hand you a couple, if I may.
Please hand it to Doris. Thank you.
Just kind of showing, there's a couple of plumbing trucks there and the other cars that got snowed in, and they could not be towed out because they were snowed in. And evidently, you can't call the tow truck to pull them out unless it's cleared. So it's kind of a little haphazard there. We're talking about a quality of life. Jim mentioned it. We hear it all the time at our board meetings. That's what we're asking for. So if you can please get this on your radar once again. It was there before the election.
Steve,
I like it there after.
Steve, how much more you got?
I'm
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Who'd like to be the next speaker?
So, in continuing with our saga,
Well,
Ms. Doris, for you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm the scientist in the group, and the HOA asked me
Please
to...
state your name and
Oh, I am
neighborhood.
so sorry. My
Thank
name
you.
is Lynn Slepsky, and I live in Saybrook.
Thank you.
I'm the scientist in the group. I was asked to collect some data. We were originally told that these cars were part of our neighborhood, when in fact there are 138 cars that parked consecutively for the periods of October 3 through the 15th, more than 2 days. I had intended to collect data longer. However, on the night of the 15th, I was accosted by one of these car owners. This gentleman happens to have 2 cars and drives a third. He took umbrage to the fact that I was taking pictures of license plates. That's how we were collecting our data. And he threatened me, started to follow me. I had to call my husband to come and get me. I had a second encounter with another one of our out-of-neighborhood parkers, and that was on the 24th. This gentleman was unburying his car, dumping 1.5 feet of snow in the one lane that was accessible on Saybrook View. When I asked him to please throw the snow on the lawn, he said, "Look, this is my right. I can throw snow any place I want to. You should be digging me out, and if you don't help me, I'm going to get you." Call the police. I was told that they could do absolutely nothing. How have these cars impacted me personally? Well, I live on the other side of the four-way stop. Every week, my sleep is interrupted by car alarms going off. Every week, there is at least one fist fight where they're fighting over the last available parking spot. I've had people knock on my door at 11 o'clock at night asking where they can park. I've had, I don't walk alone in my neighborhood at night anymore. I don't even like to walk in my neighborhood with my 104-pound retired military working dog, because you know what? These people feel entitled. They don't respect my neighborhood. They toss their stuff all over the place. We've had problems with landscaping trucks, with trailers. You'll see pictures of commercial vehicles that park in our neighborhood. There are men that mill around during the day. These men seemingly have nothing better to do. I don't know if they're scoping out my neighborhood, if they're selling drugs, but I do know they're not terribly modest, because they'll relieve themselves on the street, which is a public nuisance and a public health threat. We've had problems with traffic increasing substantially, cars parked illegally, parked left curb, facing in the opposite direction. And, while we've already had problems with our four-way intersection, school buses blowing through, we now have a substantially increased amount of traffic that's going through. And I believe that this is detrimental to my property values. I'm an active duty officer. I selected Saybrook after 42 homes.
Lynn, how much more you got here?
3 seconds.
Okay.
My plan was to remain in place. I'm now questioning my decision, even though I've dumped thousands of dollars into my house. I don't know that I want this neighborhood anymore, because you know what? It doesn't have the feel of a neighborhood. It
Okay.
feels like I'm downtown.
Thank you for your testimony. Any further testimony, by the way, you guys can send in writing, and we're glad to consider it. No. I'm saying if your 3 minutes runs out, then you can always submit more.
Okay, my name is Christine. I prefer not to give my last name. I live in Saybrook, and I live with this every day. The same things Lynn said. One night car alarms went off 4 times between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. I work full time. I have to sleep at night. I have people leaning on my fence along Victory Farm, groups of men and sometimes women, drinking, shouting, people that come to pick up these people that are parking there to take them to another community, honking their horns in the middle of the night. Oh, I'm over here. I worried about prostitution, drug sales. I don't know what's going on out there, but the people are throwing trash all over the neighborhood, beer bottles, condoms. I mean, talk about quality of life. It's very unnerving. When we had the police talking at our annual meeting, they suggested I go out and confront these people in the middle of the night. I have gone out and spoken to some of them. They said that they're parking there because some of the communities along Girard are charging $600 a year if they have more than 2 vehicles on premises. That's why they're parking in our neighborhood. These are spaces that we used to use as overflow for people within the community who had work vehicles. They couldn't park on the internal streets, and guess, those spaces are now gone. And it's been replaced with people, as Lynn said, who have no concern for our neighborhood, for the people who live there, for what we have to put up with. And they are offensive, they're vulgar, and I've also seen them relieving themselves on the street, and I'm tired of it.
Thank you. Beth, come on up.
I'm Beth Juni, community of Saybrook. In 2014, November 2014, I met with Mr. Tomasello to discuss the influx of the cars into the community. It had just started, and I was concerned, and my concern was twofold. One was for our community, and then also for Kelly Field. At that time, I was concerned that the parking overflow from the events at the field would spill into our community and the other community across the street. We discussed it. I'm sure he remembers. He sent the investigators out to start looking at the license tags on the cars up and down Victory Farm, and we found out that most of them were residents outside of our community, but city residents. After investigating the situation, I found out that most of them come from the communities up and down Girard Street. Some of the businesses in town will bring their cars, park them, and then go back to their businesses, which I don't think is quite right. But I did want to tell you of some of the things that my neighbors go through, which I can't imagine would be acceptable for any of you. In 2016, we found ourselves in an untenable situation, having neighbors verbally attacked, blocks of neighbors robbed of life quality, enduring a cacophony of car alarms, racing cars, radios blaring, car horns, loud conversations, men sitting on the theme fence at night drinking, the daily dumping of trash in yards, and I can't forget the fist fight over one remaining parking spot one day. These two men got in a fist fight. And there is an occasional X-rated activity in the car's curbside, which are just yards from the front doors of some of my neighbors' homes. Christine's home faces right onto Victory Farm. And none of us in this room should have to experience what this community is now experiencing. You know, I've lived in the community a long, long time. The city has always supported us. And when we come with an issue, it's usually a serious issue. And I am very concerned now that the cars are spilling into our community and parking. And when you ask them, this is a community you can't park in, they'll say, I can do whatever I please. And it's really turned into a very unpleasant situation for a number of the streets around Victory Farm. I'm awakened at night. I don't even live in Victory Farm with the car alarms that go off. And in the summer when the windows are open, it's just absolutely unbearable. So we need your help desperately. We're on our knees pleading for our property values and life
Thank
quality.
you, Beth. We get it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please, come on up.
I live in Victory Farm. I live parallel to the street.
Can you state your name, please,
sure.
in your neighborhood?
Liana Vega Hernandez, 7 Oxley Square.
Okay.
I live along Victory Farm. And we moved to this house 8 years ago, moving from another state. So we did a big search before we decided where to live. Since this parking issue has happened, I have a 2-year-old that I don't allow her to play outside, because all the cars that are parked and everything that is going on in front of the house. I have people fixing their car outside my front yard during the day. I have people bringing their mechanics with all the parts of the cars in the green areas. My husband and I, we have to pick up trash every weekend. We pick up pizza boxes, we pick up all kind of bottles, all kind of cans, all kind of litter that we have to use gloves to pick up. You know, we have a young toddler, and during the night, there's all this noise going on. You know, we have people coming, parking their cars, leaving their cars there. The alarm goes off. Unfortunately, the owner doesn't even know the alarm is going off. So we have this going on all night long, and with a young child, and we have to wake up early in the morning to go to work, just like our neighbors said. We have this. The foot traffic has increased severely. That, you know, it's people walking up and down through the street all the time. Also, when you are coming out of the neighborhood towards Victory Farm and you want to make a left turn, visibility is zero because all the vans that you have on your right side. So you really need to come almost to the middle of the street of Victory Farm to make a left turn. So it has really become an issue to our life. We recently brought a realtor because we are really considering selling our property. The first thing that he said, what's going on with all those cars in front of your house? And this was the realtor who sold the house to us 8 years ago. And he said, I don't remember that happening 8 years ago. And that's exactly what I say, exactly. If that was happening 8 years ago, I wouldn't have bought this house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Steve Beach. I live in Fairgrove Terrace in Saybrook, and I'd like to echo what everybody else has said here. I've been a lifelong resident of Saybrook for close to 27, 28 years. And I think what they're saying about a quality of life issue is not really capturing it. It's more or less what I would characterize as a slow decline of a neighborhood, and it's tied directly to, a lot of the issues are tied to parking. Everything they've said, I don't have to sit here and repeat, but it's get to a situation where you are almost. Tonight I made the supreme sacrifice. I gave up my parking spot. I won't be able to get back in when I go back home. So there's just, I'd like you to consider what everyone else has said. I'd like you to consider there's a certain issue on our particular court where people double park on the curb, not in their driveways, not in parking lots, and it's obstructing traffic. As recently as this week, there was a school bus for a special needs child that lives on our court. The bus could not turn around the court to deliver the child to their home and was sitting there honking for 10 minutes. My wife went outside and took pictures, but it's a situation we've known for years that people are driving through our neighborhood, so they don't have to go over the traffic bumps. But now it's getting to be a situation where they just, why drive through? We'll just park here. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Pete Henry. I'm not from Saybrook, 11 Stanley Court, Potomac, Maryland. But I'm listening and reflecting on this. So many problems and issues you have to get in front of, like parking, and I own properties where if you're not in front of the parking, it gets worse and worse and worse. You really have to get out in front of it. And this council in the city has been in front of a lot of things. Some of them are legacy items that they just are going to have to go back and clean up. One you were in front of was Watkins Mill Interchange. You were there 20 years ago. I was there. We were there together. And we've been through this in terms of the zoning and the planning, putting together great projects that won't have these kind of problems. They've watched it. They've got a great staff to do this. They've made sure that the roads are put in place. It's an Evel Knievel jump. You can come up from either side. We've put in about $500 million so far in the project, and we're committed to it. But you really need to have that interchange in place to make it financially viable. When we deal with the tenants, the kind of tenants that you want in this project, and to bring into the city, we have to have that interchange. So we all know this. I want to thank you guys for getting Rob involved, his group. We know you've been out front as well. I do think Mike's comment in terms of profile matters to these politicians. What's in the newspaper matters. They're up for re-election. They think about this stuff and they read about it. To the extent you can move it and elevate this thing and bring it back to the attention, have a press release, it makes a difference. It doesn't just make a difference in that first touch. It makes a difference in the retouch as I go and meet the secretaries and potentially the governor. So anything you can do in that effect, we appreciate it. We're on board to help fight for this as well. Get ahead of it and stay ahead of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers this evening? Not seeing any. Tony, you and I, we've broached the subject of parking on Victory Farm. How should we proceed here to take a good look at this issue and see what the best solutions might be?
You had already stated that it was the next in line, that you wanted it seen as quickly as possible. From my own comments today, I had reports on 2 items like that, the Victory Farm parking and the pesticide. I'll save the pesticide for later. But we would have selected a date for that discussion today if it hadn't been a late opening in the agenda meeting.
Right.
I can't say. So we're very close. We have some staff recommendations. A lot of them have to do with the ripple effect that this could cause and how to mitigate that. But we hear them, and we're real close.
Sure.
And when we do get it scheduled, obviously the leadership is here, and we'll be notifying them, and they can use their HOA communication channel to let people know what's going to happen.
Right.
So, but we're like I said, we would have scheduled today. We just did not. We were not able to convene the agenda team.
So this isn't the first neighborhood where we've had parking issues. We've had it on West Air Park, where I think we eventually decided on a permit. We've had it on near Gaithersburg High School, and the high school is under Easter Park.
That
the high school is under construction, and students lost their their parking lot, then they began to use residential streets as well, I think so. So we have a combination of enforcement as well as neighborhood parking permit issues in which neighbors who were in the community but lived far away from the parking felt this was an undue burden on themselves to have a permit, whereas the people that were most victimized by it were the ones right where it's happening. So, I lived in a city in St. Louis County where we did have parking stickers on our cars, and you could get I don't remember how that was controlled, but it was a process that it became a matter of routine, but it was easier for parking enforcement to occur and to happen, and for consequences as a result of that. So I think that there's a number of things. So hopefully we'll discuss these issues, but I really think that at some point, this isn't the only place we're talking about parking issues, but this is one that particularly affects how you live your daily life, how your family's impacted and your neighbors impacted. So you're right, none of us would stand for this in any of our other neighborhoods. Some of us have had to deal with it in different circumstances, so we certainly have to deal with this up front.
I'm certainly interested in hearing more about the parking situation, but another component of what I heard there is not only a parking situation, but a nuisance element, in fact, a criminal element. And so I'm sure Mark knows about this, but perhaps it's worth reiterating to him that there are these issues there, and perhaps we need increased enforcement presence within the communities. Because I know we do focus our patrols on areas based on where the crimes are reported. If the citizens aren't reporting these things because they're not quite rising to the level of something that they would call in, we just need to make sure that Mark knows that they're going on so that we can have increased enforcement in that area.
Absolutely.
I think it is important for the community to report those incidents whenever you witness them, and report them as soon as you can.
Yep.
Just based on what I heard, and I'm sorry I was here late, but I was listening to the broadcast over the internet as I was driving in today. I'd recommend that we get the police to start patrolling right away. We've clearly got some nuisance issues going on, and we've had police patrols over stop sign issues. This sounds a lot more serious. I think we should get them. I don't. Even though we'll schedule a further discussion and try to figure out a longer-term solution, I think it's pretty clear that we need help in the short term. So hopefully we can get something like that going sooner than later.
Absolutely. It's an interesting, when we, the last neighborhood that we proffered a parking permit program to rejected it, which was Floral Park behind City Hall. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we have not established a new parking permit program in years. And some of them work a lot better than others. But the issues are different in every group. High school kids that are gone by 3 o'clock is a different issue than people sitting on your fence drinking beer. We'll bring it back just as quickly as we can, and the neighborhood will come back in. Mark will be here, the chief of police. Ollie, Public Works, has their recommendations as well.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's been almost 4 months since Henry and I met with residents of the community in person on this issue, and we actually did witness some of the activity that is being described tonight. Coincidentally, it was middle of the day, and we still witnessed some of that activity. And that was on October 24th. Had some discussions with colleagues and staff on that day and the days that followed that. And we as a city pride ourselves on responding efficiently and quickly to concerns of communities. The wheels of government turn slowly, and even the efficient governments take a little while to address problems. But I do think it's been long enough, and whatever our ultimate resolution is to these issues, and I don't know what it will be, but whatever it is, I do think we need to get cracking and really develop a plan to respond. And I'm looking forward to hearing staff's recommendations turned around quickly.
Great. Thank you all. Next, we have joint public hearing. So I'd like to invite the Planning Commission to join us here at the dais. And is Louise here? Yes.
Yes, she's there.
Okay.
She's coming.
And Louise is hiding from me, so I couldn't see that she was here. Lloyd, welcome. Matt?
Hey, Lloyd.
I saw. It's like I just saw you. Fernando.
Fernando. Welcome aboard, brother. Can you start the meeting over again?
Hey, Matt.
Okay, public hearing is beginning. Louise, please take the lead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council and Planning Commission. This is a joint public hearing on text amendment CTAM-7232-2016. The draft text amendment proposes amendments to Chapter 24, Article 16, entitled Affordable Housing Requirements, Section 24-249, entitled Purpose and Intent, Section 24-250, entitled Definitions, Section 24-252C, entitled Requirements to Build and Sell Affordable Housing in For-Sale Housing Developments, and Section 24-255, entitled Affordable Housing Requirements for Developments in Designated Areas in Any Enterprise Zone established pursuant to state law as of July 21st, 2008. This hearing was duly advertised on January 29th and February 4th, 2016 in the Washington Post and posted on the city's website. At the present time, there are 10 exhibits in the record file. They are referenced in an exhibit list in the file. The individual exhibits may be reviewed at City Hall during regular business hours or on the city's website at www.gaithersburgmd.gov/services/housing-services. Any objections to the receipt of any of the exhibits should be noted prior to the closing of the record. Otherwise, they will be deemed received into evidence. For the record, my name is Louise Kaufman, Housing and Community Development Chief with the Department of Finance and Administration. The amendment was sponsored by the Mayor and Council on January 19, 2016, at which time the Mayor and City Council voted to hold a joint public hearing tonight. As outlined in the memorandum presented during the January 19th introduction, Exhibit 3 amendments include eliminating income minimums for MPDU applicants altogether, modifying the calculations under which a developer would be required to contribute to the Housing Initiative Fund rather than construct the required units due to high condominium fees, and modifying Section 24-255 regarding developments in the enterprise zone. I will present a brief PowerPoint with an overview of the proposed amendments. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold their record open until 5 p.m. on March 10, 2016, 23 days, with anticipated recommendation on March 16, 2016. Staff recommends that the Mayor and Council hold their record open until 5 p.m. on March 18, 2016, 31 days, with anticipated policy discussion on April 4, 2016. I will go ahead with this PowerPoint, okay? Not quite sure why this PowerPoint is not up.
There it is.
There it is. Oh, thank you very much, Mayor. So tonight is the joint public hearing on CTAM 7232-2016. It is an introduction, an ordinance to amend Chapter 24 of the City Code, Article 16, entitled Affordable Housing Requirements, as I described earlier. There are 4 proposed modifications to Chapter 24, Article 16, 2 of which are nearly identical, as Section 24-249 and 24-250 both describe and define the permissible incomes. for an MPDU buyer or renter, those incomes are currently between 50 and 80% of area median income. And for workforce housing units, specifically for home buyers, those incomes are between 80 and 120% of AMI. By eliminating the income minimums for the MPDU applicant, we would allow additional applicants to be considered for our program. In FY15, 7 buyers had incomes below 50% of AMI. In FY16, thus far, 4 buyers with incomes below 50% of AMI have purchased a home in the city. Some jurisdictions do not have minimum incomes based on area median income. Instead, they set a floor. For example, Montgomery County buyers must have a minimum income of $35,000 to be eligible to apply for an MPDU. An eligible buyer at 50% of AMI would have to earn approximately $55,000 to qualify for an MPDU in the city, which is about 70% of the city's median income of $79,000. Go back. We find that credit scores, stable employment history, and debt-to-income ratios are more likely to be factors that lenders look at when qualifying a buyer. Additionally, HUD has a homebuyer purchase program that allows low-income residents who receive a housing choice voucher to purchase a residential property rather than use those funds towards their rent. The buyer's income is used solely to determine his or her own portion of the mortgage. Currently, those buyers would not qualify based on our existing area median income minimums. Okay. Under Section 24-252, requirements to build and sell affordable housing in for-sale developments. In cases where high common ownership community fees render the units unaffordable to eligible buyers, the mayor and council may require the developer to contribute a fee to the Housing Initiative Fund rather than construct the units. Although we understand that the mayor and council are generally opposed to allowing a builder to opt out of their affordable housing obligations, there may be occasions when high common ownership fees render the units to be unaffordable to eligible buyers. And in those cases, the mayor and council may require the developer to contribute a fee to the Housing Initiative Fund rather than to construct the unit. We understand that condominiums generally have higher homeownership fees than those imposed in townhomes. For example, when the units at Summit Hall Reserve were sold, the HOA fees for townhomes were $100 a month, but for condominiums, they were more than twice that amount at $210 a month. In high-rise properties, particularly, the condo fees may be considerably higher. For example, a proposed condo fee at a new property in Gaithersburg is approximately 50 cents a square foot. For a 1,000-square-foot condo, that monthly fee would be nearly $500, exclusive of utility costs. If that same MPDU were sold at $200,000 with a monthly principal, interest, taxes, and insurance of $1,150, their combined housing payment would be nearly a third higher. Since a payment in lieu is currently permitted based on the difference between the market sales price and the cost of construction, staff wishes to make sure that we have an appropriate calculation for that fee. Before we come back to the council with a specific proposal for a housing initiative payment, we would want to examine how other jurisdictions are making similar fee in lieu determinations. The primary question is, what is the right figure for such a payment? When the city agreed to waive the requirement for 48 workforce housing units at Crown Farm, the developer paid $3 million into our Housing Initiative Fund, or a per-unit fee of $62,500. We would want to ensure that whatever fee is set is not so low as to be a disincentive
a disincentive to offering the affordable units, nor so high that they offer units that would be unaffordable to the target buyer population. Montgomery County currently allows a fee in lieu to be calculated at 3% of all units. If the city were to use that percentage at a property with 100 market units at $400,000 each, the fee in lieu would be $12,000 per unit, or $1.2 million in total. Should the council decide that a fee in lieu is not warranted, the mayor and council could consider offering some housing initiative funds to assist buyers, those at the lower end of the income range, with a portion of their monthly fees, or could use the funds to buy down other costs, such as buying down the purchase price. Section 24255 establishes the affordable housing requirements for developments in designated areas in any enterprise zone established pursuant to state law as of July 21st, 2008. This map of the enterprise zone is both the original enterprise in the purple designated as of that date, and then the enterprise zone phase 2 where the designation does not apply. As the original enterprise zone designation will expire in 2018, the mayor and council may consider two options: to retain this language with no modification, or to add or identified by the mayor and council by resolution for exemption. This language would simply give the mayor and council the flexibility to create exemptions in other areas of the city over time. Following adoption of the ordinance, a work session will be held to identify any proposed modifications to the affordable housing regulations, and staff expects to schedule the work session in early summer 2016. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold the record open until 5 p.m. on March 10, 2016, or 23 days, with anticipated recommendation on March 16, 2016. Staff also recommends that the mayor and council hold their record open until 5 p.m. on March 18, 2016, or 31 days, with anticipated policy discussion on April 4, 2016.
Louise, thank you very much for the presentation. I'll remind everybody here that that we should keep our remarks to questions as to the degree possible, and hear from the public on this matter. There's a lot that's sort of on the table. I was sort of going back and forth a little with Ryan today. I know Ryan's got a bunch of questions, so I'm going to start with him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, most of my questions that I had earlier today, I had sent to staff, and so they've been incorporated into the presentation, and so it's kind of a little backwards. I do still kind of want to quickly go through the bullet points of my questions just for the benefit of the public and my colleagues, so you sort of see where I was coming from. And I apologize, I guess, for all of the numbers and examples that were thrown into that presentation. They're probably responses to the questions I sent along, but I do think they were helpful. Although we might have to go back and revisit them because there were so many numbers. I had sent to staff some questions sort of broken down into the categories of the three different subject matters that were presented in this legislation. The first being lowering the minimum qualification below the 50% AMI mark to qualify for an MPDU. And I had asked what the basis was for that proposal. And there had been some general reference in the background materials to the fact that some folks who might otherwise be good candidates weren't qualifying, but I wanted to get some more real hard data and specific examples of how folks get affected by this and what the other factors are that lenders or landlords might consider. And staff did a good job of already talking about factors like credit to debt ratio and other things. So I think that sort of already responds to that question, but that's where I was coming from, because I was trying to get a sense of how we could put a clearer regulatory system in place that opens up eligibility but still achieves the goals of our overall affordable housing ordinance program. And to me, it raises the question, whether we want to continue for our goal to be to target folks within a certain area median income, or whether we want to change our goal for the program. And I'm not making a judgment call at this point. I'm just sort of raising the question because my understanding of the basis for the program as it was originally conceived is to focus on folks in a certain bracket, the folks who were not the poorest of the poor, but still had great struggles with housing. If we get rid of the floor on our program, we may be changing our goals, not necessarily for the worse, not necessarily for the better, but we may just be changing our goals. And I think we should do some thinking about that and what that means for the intent and purpose of our program and what we want it to do. I had also asked how we could be sure that we're not opening up the door to situations where residents who were below the 50% AMI mark who do obtain MPDUs through our program don't become over-leveraged or end up losing their units or damaging their credit or end up having sort of these unintended consequences of being part of what is otherwise a positive program and end up being the worse off for it. Because we do so much underwriting and background checking together with lenders and landlords, it seems to me that there are ways, as you said in your presentation, Louise, to address that as well. The second item is the high common ownership community fee, which when you hear the numbers, it's really striking. I owned a condo in Gaithersburg for a number of years before I moved into my home, my single-family home, and the condo fees in my unit were outrageous, many hundreds of dollars a month. And folks out there, in the market, are paying this, but it is a heavy burden. And I had asked why we were taking the approach of allowing the developer essentially to buy out of the set-aside program because of the fact that these condo fees were so expensive and potentially so detrimental to our affordable housing program participants, as opposed to trying to figure out how to assist these otherwise eligible buyers with covering that expense and still requiring those units to be there. And as you pointed out, I guess our existing program already allows that buyout. It just calculates it in a different way.
Yes, correct.
But to me, that raised the question whether we should even be allowing it in our existing program, and whether instead we should be finding ways to help eligible buyers cover that cost and maintain those units instead of just having there be a buyout. And that may be a question that's beyond the scope of this hearing and this bill, because it's a bigger question about whether the buyout should even be allowed. But I did want to raise it because, to me, if the goal is to create these units, then having that buyout process and not assisting the folks who otherwise need the assistance to deal with these large condo fees kind of defeats the purpose. And I worried that there could be sort of an incentive here for a developer to get out of having to provide these units, because before a common ownership community is handed over to the residents, the unit owners, to be able to control their own condo association or HOA, the developer essentially controls the HOA, as we know. And so there might be a built-in incentive there for the developer to have the condo fees be extraordinarily high, so that it justifies being able to use the buyout option. So I was just trying to figure out kind of how this works exactly, how the fee would be calculated, when it would be collected, particularly if we're talking about a percentage of all unit sales. My understanding from the examples you described is that the calculation of the percentage of all unit sales is basically just taking the approved plan on day one and saying if the approved plan allows for the construction of 100 condo units, then we're doing a percentage of unit sales based on the sales price and the presumption that all 100 of those approved condo units are going to be built. Is that right? I mean, my concern was you look at a big development and you see it gets sold in phases and it takes a long time for all the units to be sold. So how do you calculate what the percentage of units sold is if it takes years to sell all the units? But it looks like...
And also, to your point, if sales don't result in the initial sales pricing, they may in fact drop sales prices. So the time theoretically to do it is initially that they would notify in advance, along with the plan, what the proposed sales prices would be.
Right, but sales prices could also theoretically increase over time as you're continuing to sell units that are coming online. So I worry about the counter problem as well, as whether we're being shortchanged on the value of those units. And then the other major policy question attached to that item is what we're using the Housing Initiatives Fund for. How are we using it? Are we using it effectively? Do we have a plan to use that money if we're going to keep collecting it to make sure that we're meeting the goals of our program, or are we just collecting a bunch of money and sort of haphazardly using it here and there for little programs that aren't really getting to the bigger issue? Maybe it's worth considering whether we should be using some of the HIF funds that we collect to help folks with those high condo fee payments and still have them be able to get into some of those units. I don't know. But if we're not using the HIF funds the right way, then what we're doing is we're just creating a buyout system that doesn't sufficiently address the number of units that we'd otherwise be getting. And then finally, and thank you all for bearing with me on these, because we're doing this kind of backwards. I'm asking the questions after most of them have been answered. But finally, the issue with the enterprise zone exemption. I had some concerns about the way the draft language was presented. It sounds to me like the intention from staff was to allow us to essentially mirror the same boundaries that we have now with the exemption in Old Town under the original enterprise zone. But as I read the language proposed by staff in the legislation, it says we can create an exemption anywhere in the city by simple resolution, which concerns me because that seems to create a very easy process for exempting any part of the city or all of the city from the affordable housing ordinance, which may be a serious problem if our policy view, and I know we'll get to our policy views during policy discussion, but if our policy view is not to exempt the city with the exception of the enterprise zone, then we should probably rewrite that language for that third piece. So thank you all for bearing with me. Those were my concerns.
Who's next?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
So let's start with the last issue first. Can you explain to us what the benefits are to a developer for building in the area in an enterprise zone?
What
are the benefits
to a
developer in building in an enterprise zone? Residential developer in the enterprise zone. What are the benefits they get?
Well, they get the exemption from the affordable housing requirement. If
what
they
else?
don't. Well, currently it's based on the state enterprise zone designation, so they get a number of credits for that exemption, for being in that.
So yeah, that's what I'm asking. What are those credits? What's the value of them?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the point is there's supposed to be an incentive to build in the enterprise zone through use of these credits, so that the cost to the developer is less than it would be outside of the enterprise zone. Correct?
It's to encourage more new development in Old Town Gaithersburg currently.
Where the enterprise zone currently exists.
Right. So that's why Archstone, which built 390 units, paid us $390 and didn't have to fulfill the requirements because there's already so much affordable housing, market rate affordable housing in Old Town. That was the discussion that we had when
that was part of the discussion. Yeah. But there's a benefit to building in the enterprise zone that hasn't actually, there's incentives to build and develop in the enterprise zone that actually we haven't realized at this point, other than Archstone. Correct? Is that?
I really don't know the answer to that, Mike.
Well, we've only had the one project. We have another one now underway, but that's not a market rate project.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
It's great to have. It's great that the exemption is there as an opportunity. It would seem that the exemption that exists now should be a good incentive, a strong incentive for a developer to come in and do some redevelopment there, given the other credits that they get. Now they have that benefit until the enterprise zone expires, which I think is in 2018, is that right?
It is in 2018.
2018. And after that, those credits go away unless the council decides to grant them again, and perhaps the county agrees to support them as well, because they're relieved of credits. They have credits, and then there's impact fees that were waived by the county as well. So there's a lot of savings to be realized by building in the enterprise zone now. So there wouldn't be any of those benefits if we just created another exemption anywhere else in the city, right?
That's correct.
And it wouldn't achieve our goal of increasing the inventory of affordable units throughout the city, which is really partly what we want to do, is we want to try and increase that. So, and I guess rather than talking about this the way we've been talking about it, the same issues that Ryan brought up, is that whether or not we should let an exemption that exists now expire or sunset with the expiration of the enterprise zone. You know, I think one thing about incentives is that it's to incent the act of doing something, you know, proactively. It hasn't seemed to work, but if one knows that the incentive is going to evaporate, one might be spurred to or stimulated to try and benefit from that while we have the opportunity. So I guess on that particular issue, I'm more concerned about whether or not we would continue an exemption once all the other credits are gone. So I guess that would depend on what our goals are in any particular area of the city where we wanted to do this. The other, I have this similar concerns about how do we ensure that, you know, one of our purposes in creating an affordable housing ordinance was to, in future development throughout the city, is that there would be inclusive communities being built, and that the inventory of affordable housing would be created throughout the city wherever there was going to be new development. I guess I'm concerned to some extent that this buyout opportunity either encourages ridiculously high association fees, the creation of that, or an opportunity where we might be shortchanged in terms of the eventual selling price of units that are built, even though they pay this into the, that's certainly possible, correct? So
I'm sorry, Mike, but our primary concern when we looked at that language about what's currently allowed is that the payment would be the difference between the market unit sales price and the cost of construction, and we didn't know how the mayor and council, how staff would look at cost of construction. That to us is something that the developer could send us, cost of construction that may or may not be in fact the exact cost of construction. So maybe we should fine tune that language, because the buyout obviously is already there. It does allow the buyout when the condo fees are so high that it makes the units not affordable.
yeah. So is there some formula for determining what is a reasonable and fair condo fee? Condo fees pay for upkeep and maintenance of common properties, trash removal, snow removal, grounds and landscaping maintenance, security, and the amenities. The exercise facility, the pool, perhaps even a parking, structured parking, something like that, maintaining that. So, I mean, certainly you could keep adding to that to create to inflate the condo fee, or to actually create value in the condo fee. And certainly that's the shared interest that everybody pays in terms of wanting to live in that particular community. But it does kind of subvert our other intent to create inclusive communities in whatever kind of project we're looking at. So,
and I would guess this would be more likely to happen in high-rises than because there are so many additional costs. So the example that I cited was, in fact, in a five-story high-rise. Yeah.
Okay, and so we have a couple of those projects basically approved already? They just
No, they have not been
they haven't been
approved.
built?
They've come before us
Oh, that's right.
in draft form only.
They've
They have
been
not
drafted
approved.
for a couple of locations in the city.
Well, for one specifically, they have sent me the pricing formula worksheets, and they've given us the proposed condo fees, and I've had a number of questions that I've sent back to them, so don't have anything final from them to review.
Okay, and the last question is on the first issue about setting our rate of our eligibility. Can give us a sense again of how many more people would be eligible than have been eligible in the last few rounds of availability of affordable
Well,
housing?
when I went and looked at the numbers for for 2015 and 2016, there have been 13 buyers for our program with incomes below. This is our GALP program, where the prices can be, around the same or a little more. So clearly, we have gotten approved loans from lenders for units that are available to people below 50%. As I said, 50% of AMI in the Washington area region, which is AMI is $109,200, then 50% is basically $55,000. But if you look at the median income for Gaithersburg, it's $79,000.
So, in follow-up to that, are you saying that folks who are below the floor for the program are still getting into the MPDUs, or is this the different is the GALP program for different
which
units?
also supports MPDUs. So it's the GALP and the MPDU program that we've provided loans to for those buyers.
So folks,
those
so even though
13
the law is that folks are supposed to be between 50 and above, where they're getting in even though they're lower than 50%. Not that I necessarily have a principal objection to that, but I'm just trying to figure that out.
Well, what I looked at were the GALP loans that the city has made. So I didn't look specifically at the MPDU loans.
Okay.
I looked at what people can buy, how are people getting loans, mortgages with incomes. And the lowest income was about 40%. So there was a range between 40 and 49%.
Do you know what Habitat for Humanity uses for their eligibility criteria? Basically, we're talking about MPDUs for all of those units.
I don't know. I can check that, but I would guess it's below 50% of AMI. That's the target, that population that they are, trying to serve.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of their screening, their success rate with individuals having those loans is nearly 100%. So the default rate is like 1 out of 99 or 1 out of 100. So I guess that tells us that careful screening is an effective measure.
So Lois, on the first issue, is it a question of otherwise creditworthy individuals gaining access to the program, or are we having problems moving the units? Do we have excess capacity because we don't have enough people? I suspect I know the answer to that question, but I'll ask it.
If we don't have a lot of experience with the MPDU program, we have it in two places, at Crown and at Summit Hall Reserve. So the prices for Summit Hall Reserve were about $236,000 for the MPDUs. That was kind of high. So we, as far as I know, didn't have anybody below 50%. So I guess the answer to your question isn't that we don't have enough potential buyers. It's whether or not we should open up the units to otherwise credit-worthy, people who are ready to buy, who are below that 50% minimum.
And then the second question I had was with respect to the calculation for the buyout. Let's see, what is it exactly called? Anyway, the calculation for the buyout, it would seem that you could set that in such a way that it's a wash for the developer. So their sale price versus their cost is the delta. You could set the fee through the other formula to be about the same for the buyout. It sounds like it's the problem in calculating the cost and the problem with perhaps being shortchanged on the actual sale price calculation that the developers are providing. Has there been any thought to retaining that formula, meaning that the developer pays the delta, but changing the way that we enforce it. So that, for example, you had mentioned that if the developer might not be proposing the exact cost for development, well, there's ways to figure that out. Why not have them submit the cost and have them certify it? If they are committing fraud, they're committing fraud. There's a way to deal with that. And changing the formula with respect to, I guess, what the sale price for the properties are. I don't know how it's calculated currently, but it seems to be knowable to get a comp price for something that's sold at the same time. Might be a little bit more work, but it would be capturing more of the benefit for the program.
Right, for new units, for these brand new units. I know at Summit Hall Reserve, they did approach the city to allow them to not to waive the requirement. They ended up not. We were able to sell all the units to MPDU eligible households, and we believe the reason was because of our GALP program, because we we helped with the down payment, and all MPDUs that are sold, all the closing costs are paid for by the seller. So the buyer has no closing costs and gets assistance from the city with down payment. It used to be up to $20,000. So, there are lots of ways that we help our buyers make the calculation work for them.
Well, talking about for the developer in making their calculation for whether or not they wanted to build the unit or seek to buy out of the program. It would seem to me that in the abstract it could be a wash, because you know what the sale price is going to be, you know what the cost of construction is going to be, and they would do their math from there. I guess I'm missing the issue with why we want to change it from one thing to another.
Well, as I said, we weren't sure how that cost of construction would be presented to us, but if the council feels that there's a better way to do it based on cost of construction, then we wouldn't have to change the language.
Tony, did you have something to add? No, okay. It looked like. Go ahead. Come on up.
I think kind of the missing element is predictability. For us, you can hire someone to estimate construction costs, but construction costs is a bit of a moving target. It's a little vague. Is it carrying cost of interest? Is it insurance? Is it marketing costs? Is it? Finished lots cost different amounts of money. Sales price is really predictable. It's we charge a fee if in fact if the trade-off is we're going to put money in the Housing Initiative Fund to do other affordable housing things versus creating some units, that we just thought at least opening that up was a way to make it more predictable, because we don't really know what the cost of construction is going to be or even what that definition is.
Right. Okay.
That's where that came from.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions? Go ahead, Neil.
Hello.
Hi, Neil.
First of all, I'd like to chime in that I'm kind of in concurrence with what Tony just suggested in terms of knowing how finance guys work. The cost of construction could easily be all over the map depending on how they wanted it to turn out, depending on what cost they allocate in. So you want to do it on sales price, and so if there's a need to change the formula, I would definitely recommend going with something that you can easily see in the marketplace. I have a really big question, and it's really hard, and you're not going to be able to answer it for me right now, which is, is there a numerical goal for this program? Is there some census where we know what the mix of housing units and affordability of those housing units is in existence in the city today? We have a lot of housing units. We have apartments. We have single-family homes and townhomes, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if we're trying to make to build a higher percentage of affordable housing units than we have today, or trying to maintain a certain level. I'm really trying to ask what the overall goal is in terms of the way I think is, what's the percentage? What is it that we're trying to bring into the city? Are we trying to increase the number of affordable units from 10% to 15%? or do we even know what the mix is today? And we know what's being built, but do we know what's already in existence? Do we have that kind of data?
I guess what I think about is the age of the housing stock. Most of our housing stock was built before 1980. Now, MPDUs, both for sale and rental, are brand new construction, so you assume that the utility costs are lower, that people want new. In terms of, rental specifically, so a two-bedroom MPD rental unit is $1,160. You can find a apartment probably somewhere in Gaithersburg for about that price, but your utility costs are extremely high. So we are trying to give people a wider choice, and in 2005 and 2006, when the mayor and council were looking at this, they really wanted a dispersal of affordable housing because that wasn't what we had. Our affordable housing was located in certain areas. MPDUs allow that the affordable housing is dispersed throughout the city. I think that was probably our primary goal, was dispersal.
Okay.
Agree. Any other questions? Okay, then this is the time where we'd love to hear from the public on this topic. We ask that you keep your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. Timer will beep and turn yellow when you have 30 seconds left. It'll beep and turn red when your time is up. Please state your name and address for the record. Who would like to be our first speaker? I think I see Pam Lindstrom coming on up. Come on.
Yes, my name is indeed Pam Lindstrom. I live in the Deer Park community. And my friend Linda Gore and I have been sort of your consciences on affordable housing for some years. And I was pleased to see that this subject came up at this time because it prompted me to go back and read what the zoning code actually says about affordable housing. And I had a few, not necessarily all bad, but a few unpleasant surprises. And I haven't really written up full-fledged testimony yet, but we will before the end of the period that's open. All I have now is a bunch of questions, and actually they to some extent repeat what has been asked, but I think I'll go ahead and ask them, just like Ryan did. And although I of course don't get answers, he gets the answers, but I don't.
We'll make sure you get answers. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
One, how many sale and rental MPDUs and workforce housing units have been built? How many presently exist? You all may know the answer, but these are questions that you all may already have the data and know the answers to, but for the public to look at them, I think it's a good idea to have them on the record. How many MPDUs that were initially bought by somebody have been sold by that somebody? And what is the pricing restriction when an owned affordable unit is sold? I couldn't find anything in the language in the zoning code that said anything about that they couldn't just turn around and sell the unit that they just bought at a market price. Have condo units been using the buyout provision? What was the fee that was charged in those cases? How much money has been raised from the affordable housing fee, and what was the revenue used for? I think this is just sort of basic stuff that everybody needs to know to judge how this program is working. And so far, I don't think we have any I don't have any basis to judge how the program is working, and whether.
How much more you got, Pam? Can you submit the rest in writing?
Yes,
Okay.
but there's no rest of it.
Okay.
I was just going to finish the
All
sentence.
right, we'll get your question, please.
Finishing a sentence.
Oh, go on, finish your sentence.
This looks to me like a good opportunity to go back and look at the program and how it's working and whether it's achieving its goals.
Okay, thank
whether
you.
it has the right goals.
So please do put your questions together and send them in to us, and we'll see that you get answers. Linda, come on.
Just say Pam asked good questions. I'd like answers to some of them as well.
We'll all get the answers.
Okay. I'm Linda Gore. I live in Bennington, Gaithersburg's best kept secret.
You know where it is.
Yeah, you all know. Of course, you know. Just to clarify from our point of view, what one goal of the program was back when we pressed to have the affordable housing ordinance put on the books, because there wasn't one before 2006. And the goal that you, Mike, and you, Ryan, enunciated of dispersing, making sure that there's a dispersal and an equal sort of a socioeconomic integration throughout Gaithersburg Preserved, that certainly was a goal. But it may be hard to think back to the first half of the 2000s, but the other goal, frankly, the practical goal, was to preserve some vestige of affordable housing stock in the city of Gaithersburg in that extreme go-go development atmosphere early in the 2000s before the Great Recession brought everything to a halt. Gaithersburg was such it was so easy for developers to come here and to propose things that didn't include any units, whether in the rest of Montgomery County they did. So that said, I think, yes, indeed, we do need to look at the big picture before changes are made. I think that, as Pam said, we need to take a step back and really ask Louise and her staff to give an overview of exactly how the 10 years this program has unfolded, and to look at that before changes are considered. Also, indeed, the idea of putting in sort of a free-floating exemption, that if the mayor and council decides to make an exemption after the enterprise zone goes away in 2018, that really indeed is a bad idea, because there's always going to be the need to preserve the balance between the needs of people at every level to have decent housing, the needs to have mixed income situations throughout the area, because that really promotes civic well-being, and have that balanced against what the developers plan to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who'd like to be the next speaker? Kathy, come on up.
I try and do this on my phone, which I'm not used to doing. So, affordable housing is really...
Kathy, even you...
I forgot, sorry. Sorry, Kathy
Start the clock
Drusilla,
again.
16 Walker Avenue. I will say I have asked for some of those other numbers myself to be put on our website back a couple months ago. Affordable housing is really a public good. We should support it by our private efforts with government funds and through public policy, as you all know. It's a benefit to those who find homes there, to the whole community, to family members, employers, and consumers. Because of this, the whole community should share the cost. For example, in the buildings with high condo fees, the easy solution would be to exempt the unit owners and make everybody else who lives there pay the difference. But you don't usually do that, because that would impose the cost too much locally on one particular small community group of people. The same is true when affordable housing is concentrated in one local area. The lower median incomes that result, not that there's anything wrong with the people who live there, but deter investment in retail and restaurant businesses, And when income diversity gets particularly low, the availability of services is threatened. This is the biggest problem with having segregated income communities. Natural market forces tend to increase income segregation. You see this as evidenced by the Wysite project. Nowhere else in the city has anyone proposed a project like that, and the creation of those 300 units pretty much offsets any diversification you've done through all these other programs in other parts of the city. Your job is to offset this tendency to move money from places where it wouldn't naturally go to places where it should go to support affordable housing. So my biggest problem is with the last part of this, the proposed changes on the buyout option for the enterprise zone. Obviously, the one big benefit of the enterprise zone is the exemption from the county impact taxes, and that will go away no matter what we do, unless if the enterprise zone goes away, because that's a county policy. But the meets and bounds for the enterprise zone are already written into the law. That was put in when the enterprise zone was expanded, and we had to differentiate between the two halves. So certainly, if you chose to maintain the buyout option, you could just change it to have those and not reference the enterprise zone. But my biggest concern is with removing the current language without having any obligation to create a replacement, and with no direction for any goals for the goals of any exemptions you do create. I really think that there should be a continued buyout option for Old Town until there's any other changes made, and there should be direction as to what the exemption is supposed to achieve if you create new ones. That's all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Come on up.
The current buyout option in Old Town, or at least for one project, was $1 a unit, right?
That continues
Wait,
to be.
Louise, come on up to the mic.
I'm sorry. Yes, the fee since 2006 adoption has been and continues to be $1 per unit.
So that was that specific for the Archstone deal, or was it for
It's for the entire
zone? Okay, thank you.
Prentice.
Good evening, council members. My name is Prentice Searles. I live at 10 Walker Avenue. Of course, I could just say I'm Dan Searles and I live at 18 Walker Avenue, and that would take all the burden off of me and what I say.
You're not Dan. You're better looking than Dan.
Hey, there we go. I'll buy a beer later. The first thing I want to do is recognize, as our mayor did, the leadership and the work of Councilman Henry Marafa, and wish him the best in his convalescence. But getting to the point that's here, I think one of the things that kind of hit me, and I'm kind of doing what Kathy did, and I saw my daughter do it one time. I actually put my testimony on my phone, but I'm kind of old school, and I kind of did this too. So but the thing that I did see amongst the people that have already spoken, and then amongst you guys also, is that closing your record on March, this isn't ready for prime time. There's a lot of questions that I heard, a lot of questions from the audience that I heard, and you need to get those resolved. You need to have discussion around what those answers are. You need to figure that out before you close the record and move on for a vote. So Kathy said it much better than I can, and but one of the things that I see as a layman reading this, and I read through the materials before I got here, the bottom line is it's not appropriate for certain parts of the city to pay their way out of affordable housing by subsidizing it in Old Town, which I think is the result of what at least has been proposed. I don't hear you guys supporting that. I hear lots of good questions coming out of that, and I appreciate that. But if you look at removing the exemption in the enterprise zone, that would require affordable housing in new projects in the enterprise zone, which is largely in Old Town. It would also give exemptions to those builders with high HOA fees, allowing them to pay a fee in lieu of building additional units that meet the affordable housing requirements. Thus, instead of providing an opportunity for people to diversify where they live and decide where they want to live, they go to one place, and that's in Old Town. Love to have them, but as Kathy indicated, that doesn't necessarily help the economic development of the community, which is still needed. So again, and just to finish up, I think that there's a lot more questions that have been raised tonight than have been answered. And with that, there need to be a lot more discussion around what you're trying to do, and indeed, what are the principles that you're trying to accomplish? What are the goals? What are the end results? And who are you expecting to seek out? Who are you inviting in? And how are you going to help them? And do you have a program that's in place today that meets those needs or not? And if so, how do you change it? Thank you.
Thank you. Please. Oh, you're not going. Okay. Do we have another speaker on this topic? Not seeing any.
So real quickly, I would say that in terms of once the affordable housing policy was passed and we had projects built, I think affordable units, this includes multifamily rental as well. So we have 15% of the units at Hidden Creek. What was the name of that project? I don't remember exactly. That's
Highland Square.
Highland Square, 15% of the for rent units there, and 15% of the for rent units at Crown Farm are all, those are MPDUs, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Off the top of my head,
So
and I have this in my office, and sorry I didn't bring it down. I believe that we have, mostly what we have are rental MPDUs, because we've had a considerable amount of multifamily construction.
Right.
Truthfully, in the city, not including Crown.
And also Watkins Town.
Right, and those
Watkins
are all
Boulevard.
great. And we have a
Right.
number of MPDUs, rental MPDUs, and the number is about 200 off the top of my head. But for home ownership, it's true, even though the ordinance was passed in 2006, as Kathy or Pam mentioned, the housing market hit a terrible slump after that. So all we have in terms of home ownership outside of Crown, and we do have a number at Crown, is at Summit Hall Reserve, and those are 6 MPDUs and 6 workforce housing units. But at Crown, we are following the Montgomery County MPDU law. So we're talking about, our own law, how to strengthen our own MPDU law.
How many MPDU units by owner are at Crown?
At Crown,
It was 7. I think it was 7.5%.
Louise,
Anyway,
you can get us this
I'm
information,
just-
right?
Yes. We'll get you all of that.
There is just on the moderately priced dwelling page on the city's webpage, an actual inventory of the MPDUs. It's mixed with the workforce housing. They don't separate the two, but they're there. So we have 41 units for sale. So if we take the 12, that's Summit Hall Reserve out of that. That's whatever that is. That's what's at Crown.
And they're all at Crown, right.
It's 35.
And we do have new ones coming up at Crown.
Right.
Right.
It's 29.
And it should also have rental.
So,
Yeah.
I would like to suggest that we have a lot of really sort of fundamental questions on the table here about that perhaps were supposed to be or intended to be some housekeeping and some future direction for our affordable housing ordinance, but they really get to the fundamental aims of our ordinance. And I think that the points made, particularly by Ryan, Mike, Prentice, Kathy, and our speakers today, I think we really do need to open this up to a deeper discussion and really get to the root of what are our goals for this program, and that will help us get to the answer of the questions that are on the table currently. So I'm thinking that we should schedule a work session to get deeper into this. Tony, would you come to the podium?
And Mr. Mayor, I just would add to that, I think it's also very clearly a policy issue. I'm not sure any joint work with the planning commission is relevant yet until we see kind of what the shape of this looks like.
I see your point. So, Tony, would you agree that a work session would be the best approach to begin to dive deeper into this?
I think so. I mean, we obviously need to do some work behind the scenes. I mean, I'm just doing some back of the envelope, because this goes way back. And you've just used the buyout of the 58 units at Crown, $3 million, created 58 housing opportunities for MPDU and workforce buyers. $3 million could be 200 housing assistant loan programs, loans which we envision to be a revolving fund. So growing that is equally desirable. So we definitely need some policy input about
Yeah.
what we're trying to get done.
But we may also want to revisit the buyout in the first
Yeah,
place. I mean,
absolutely.
maybe we want to rethink it. I just don't know. I think it's worthy of a deeper discussion.
Right. Because the beginnings of this, it started in economic development a long time ago. It was about raising incomes in Old Town so we get better retail and restaurants. So we wanted to bring in more market rate people. Here we are 15 years later, and we may have different goals. It's reasonable to expect that we would.
Right. So the best course, given that, would be just to leave the record open and not announce a closing date at this point.
Do we need to act on?
We wouldn't need to act, right?
Now
we need Lynn, I guess.
Do we need to leave it open indefinitely, or just leave it open?
Yeah, there should be, if that's your desire, a motion to leave the record open indefinitely, and then we would come back at a future date and announce a closing date.
Okay, so I just want to ask this again, because I once suggested that, and I was told that's the kiss of death for anything that we want to do, is to leave the record open indefinitely. I don't think we want to do that here, but I want to make sure what we do is right. So if it's appropriate to leave the record open indefinitely for further assessment and evaluation, then I'll make that motion. For the council, at least.
I would second it, but I don't know if the planning commission has
Should
to
we go first? Because that's
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been suggested by staff and by mayor and council that we leave our planning commission record open indefinitely. Is there a motion?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes.
Okay, and so we have a
There's
motion.
housekeeping.
Great. We have a motion, we have a second to keep the record open indefinitely. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries 4-0. Thank you very much, Elise. Thank you, planning
you very
commissioners. As always, you're welcome to stay tonight.
We'll see you tomorrow night.
Okay. Next on our agenda is from the mayor and council tonight. We're going to start with the council member Spiegel.
Thank you. Good evening. And although the crowd has thinned out, it was nice to see a larger crowd here earlier this evening. And I echo what the mayor always says. Folks are always welcome, and we hope the large crowds will continue to come back and participate in the civic engagement process here in our meetings. We've had a bunch of weather recently. There's been a couple of references to it already tonight, and I just want to again thank our public works crews who've been working hard to salt the roads and plow the roads and do all the things behind the scenes that come along with that, particularly on Friday afternoons and weekends. And again, as we've said during the big blizzard, no process is ever going to be 100% perfect, but we feel like we certainly do a lot better job than a lot of other jurisdictions around the region, and that continues to be the case even with the smaller events that we've had over the last couple of weeks. So thanks to them. I also want to offer my congratulations to all the employees who were recognized tonight for their service to the city, and all of the folks who were appointed to boards and committees this evening as well. And thanks to the Cub Scouts for coming out tonight. Coincidentally, I happened to have visited one of the Cub Scout troops at Fields Road Elementary School on February 4th, just to talk to them a little bit about local government. And so it's kind of interesting that other Cub Scout troops are showing up tonight as well. I guess they're all coordinating over their requirement to learn about local government, which I think is great, and so it's nice to have them here tonight. I wanted to provide a quick update on the work of the Maryland Municipal League, which we are very active in, as many of you know. The League's legislative committee makes decisions about bills in the General Assembly to support or oppose that affect municipal government. And a number of us, Lynn and Dennis Enslinger, Monica Marquina, and myself serve on that statewide committee. And there have been a couple of meetings of that committee since our last mayor and council meeting. Detailed work continues to review many bills that are coming through in this busy time in the General Assembly's legislative session, to try and keep track of them and take positions on them. So as that continues to happen, we'll continue to keep you all apprised. But you certainly heard about several of them from Rob and Maura earlier this evening. I wanted to mention that on February 6th, the mayor and Councilmember Wu and I attended the Chinese New Year celebration at Lake Forest Mall. It was a really nice event, well organized and engaging for folks of all ages. I brought my little kids there, and they had a great time watching the dragon dances and the other presentations. So thanks to the folks who organized that from Lake Forest Mall and from the CCACC and other groups. On February 11th, a number of us attended a reception at Kentlands Mansion to honor and recognize all of the volunteers who work for our city's cultural and arts programs at the Mansion, at the Arts Barn, the Gaithersburg Book Festival, and many other cultural and arts programs throughout the year. So thanks to them. I was really impressed to hear that the total tally of the number of volunteer hours for those programs this past year was 8,723 hours. So thanks to all those folks for making our cultural arts program so special, along with the work of our staff and all of the other folks who do the performing as well. And then just finally, hope everyone had a good President's Day, Groundhog Day, Valentine's Day, Super Bowl celebration, and I did want to mention coming up on February 22nd, before our council session, at 6 p.m. At the Activity Center at Borough Park, there will be a reception to honor African American Heritage Month and to acknowledge the winners, the elementary school winners of our African American History Month essay contest, as well as presentations by and exhibits by artists and musicians related to African American history. So we hope to see you all there on February 22nd. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Neil.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow, Ryan. You already said everything that was on my list.
When you get to go first, you know.
I know, you got to go first again. I apologize to everyone for showing up late today, but on Tuesdays I'm teaching a class, and of course it ran late today because everybody had presentations and wanted to talk a lot. But anyway, I also want to echo Ryan's words about enjoying the chance to meet and honor our many volunteers on cultural events. I'd also like to say that we should think about honoring all the volunteers who do other things for the city on our various committees and things too. Maybe we should think about an event for them as well. But anyway, it was a terrific event, and I also, once again, just to repeat, the work of our public works staff and our city management team at getting us through the ginormous blizzard and the subsequent lesser snowfalls that at this point seem like a piece of cake relative to the 3 feet of snow, more or less. I thought our staff did an amazing job in not only the routine work, but whenever there was an issue with a particular part of the city or a particular street, as soon as it was reported, it was like people were out fixing it within very short order. So, as it was said, it wasn't an easy job. I know people were working extra hard, but I thought the city did a fantastic job of keeping up, and I hope everybody on the public works staff has had a chance to catch up on their sleep and everything. And I'd also like to thank the groundhog for saying we wouldn't have much more winter, because hopefully today's weather is indicative of what we have left. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Neil. Mike.
Gee, you guys have said it all, but just I want to congratulate our those employees who received their recognition award tonight, especially the election team, Lynn and Lauren, for that election, all the work on the election. So always, also again, compliments to our staff, Public Works, Police, all the other staff who got us through another winter event. We had crews out starting at 2 o'clock last night, apparently treating streets and making sure that there were as little as possible snow froze on the streets, so people were actually able to get out this morning, even though they had delays. So one thing I want to talk about that's not related to anything we do up here, but I think as citizens in Montgomery County, is a thing called Noah's Law, which has been introduced in Annapolis by it has a number of sponsors in the legislature. Noah Leota was a police officer in Montgomery County. He's working a traffic stop to prevent drunk drivers, to try and catch people who were driving drunk. On December 3rd, at that stop, he was hit by somebody who had a .2, or basically double the limit of alcohol in his blood, allegedly. Officer Leota died a week later after being taken off of life support. So his parents and a number of legislators testified in Annapolis for this law called Noah's Law. What it will do, will require all drunk driving offenders who've been convicted to have an interlock breathalyzer device in their car to prevent them from being able to start it and drive it away in the event that they are intoxicated or above the legal limit, above some limit. So I would advise you to, if you feel this is an important issue, many people feel that our drunk driving laws are not as rigid and as strict as they might be in Maryland. To prevent this kind of, when a police officer working a traffic stop is hit and killed, dies as a result of that, that's how bad things are. Right now, the penalties just aren't enough. This was a person, apparently the person who did this had been convicted before. So write to your elected members in the state legislature and ask them to support this law. So that's last thing I have is an official announcement. I want to give notice to the general public that the mayor and city council of the city of Gaithersburg will conduct a planning retreat session in lieu of a work session on Monday, February 29th, 2015 at 6:30 p.m. at the Benjamin Gaither Center at 80A Bureau Drive in Gaithersburg. The session will not be televised. The retreat is open to the public, but public comment will not be taken during the session. Our purpose is to talk about the strategic plan for the city and our plans, start to develop some ideas for planning the budget. For more information, including the agenda, visit the city's website at www.gaithersburgmd.gov or contact the city manager's office at 301-258-6310. That's it.
Thank you, Mike. Rob?
Well, as Ryan had mentioned, both Judd, myself, Ryan, and his family attended the Lunar New Year celebration at Lake Forest Mall put on by the CCACC. I was impressed by the number of folks that showed up for it, not just the community, but also elected officials as well. I did go to the closing ceremony, which was this Sunday, and it was equally well attended, just by regular people. I didn't see any other electeds there, but it was still great to witness as well. And again, as Ryan had mentioned, a bunch of us. Well, Ryan mentioned a lot of things. A bunch of us went to the volunteer appreciation reception, which was great. I echo all the comments that I was made. I'd also like to point out that we ate some great food there that was donated by local vendors. I just want to give them some credit. We had some food from Chick-fil-A, Nally Fresh, Nothing But Cakes, which I love, Kava, which I love as well. Actually, I love all of them. So I just wanted to say thank you to them. Not to prolong this any longer, I'm just going to read my obligatory notice. Parks, Recreation, and Culture online survey. Notice to the general public is hereby given that in preparation for an update to the Parks and Recreation element of the master plan, residents are asked to complete an online survey about existing amenities and what facilities and programs might be needed in the future. One lucky respondent will receive a Parks, Recreation, and Culture 2016 gift pack with passes to recreational facilities, theater performances, and this year's Winter Lights Festival. The 12-question survey is available on the city's website through February 26th. For more information on the survey and the master plan process, visit www.gaithersburgmd.gov or call 301-258-6350.
Thank you, Rob. You guys did such a thorough job of talking about events over the last couple weeks. I have nothing to add other than to say I thank you for all the mentions. Next week, we have a work session with two topics, an investment overview and recommended investment policy changes, and an update on procurement and recommended procurement policy changes. And then As Mike mentioned in his formal announcement, the next meeting will be our planning retreat on the 29th. So with that, let's go over to the city manager.
Thanks, Mayor. We did talk about Victory Farm, and again, we'll get that scheduled just as soon as we can. The other topic that staff has been doing some work on is the process for pesticide, a discussion of pesticide. Our expectation was that would also be a work session. We'd like to take a little different tack. We'd like to have kind of a pre-discussion, probably a presentation, a lot like what we just had with Louise. A lot of the research has nothing to do with whether pesticides are good or bad. It's how we would administer and what the challenges that would entail. Some of the aspects of the county law are a little vague as to how those things would happen and who's going to do them and where these lists of chemicals come from. Some of them are from European lists and Canadian lists, and we're just not really sure. So we'd like to have either Rob Robinson or Diane Back come to the mic, explain some of the logistical challenges, get some feedback from you, so that we'd be better prepared for an actual work session, if that's okay.
So you're talking about a presentation during a meeting? Sure.
Yep. Actually, there would be a short report sent to you in advance and posted in SIRE, kind of a white paper, and then they would go through the points of it. But we had a meeting on it today, and again, it's not to discuss the merits of pesticides, only the logistics of the administration of the law, and then how that would relate to what it is you want to enforce, if anything.
Would there be a discussion about education processes, communication, things along those lines as well?
That was one of the, I think they had 4 points that they'd like to bring up, and that was one of them.
Great. Good.
So that's the plan.
Great. Anything else?
That's it from my report.
Okay. Next, we have economic development,
which I have.
Okay.
Tom is out today. He did provide a report. The first two items, which first was about the Park Plaza Committee, which is the plaza at the corner of Summit and Diamond that's being planned. And I will just read. He wanted to let us know that the ad hoc committee reconvened last Wednesday to review the first drafts on the anticipated Old Town Park Plaza. Our design firm is A. Morton Thomas, or AMT, and they presented the committee with a couple of concept plans for consideration, and a good bit of discussion was provided and feedback, and AMT received some valuable guidance on how members wanted to see the design changed. The presentation by AMT can be found on the Park Plaza blog, which can be accessed through the city's website. Staff is planning to present an updated concept plan with the committee feedback incorporated before the Mayor and Council at an upcoming work session, which is scheduled in April. Today was also META
Tony,
Day.
let me just read the URL for that blog.
It's a long one.
It's Old Town Gaithersburg, which Old Town has E's on it. OLDETOWNE Gaithersburg.wordpress.com. Go ahead.
Right. I think it's on the project page of the city's website.
Okay, that's probably easier to find.
I'm not positive, but I think that's where it is.
Okay.
Today was Maryland Economic Development Association Day in Annapolis. We are the city's long-term META members. The event's a good opportunity for economic development professionals from around the state to hear from and meet with state legislatures and other officials. Sharon Disk from our Economic Development Office attended for the city today. The list of topics, she had a list of topics to discuss, but clearly topping the list was the discussion of and promotion of the Watkins Mill interchange. And Tom will have a subsequent report at his next presentation.
Very good.
And that's all for economic development.
Okay. Thank you. Next is ordinances, resolutions, and regulations.
And that's me.
And that's you.
Okay.
Guy tonight.
Indeed. So you have before you a resolution that would codify and update the schedule of fees, the overall schedule of fees relative to the Green Park Dog exercise area as provided for in the ordinances of the city. The resolution itself has no fee in it.
Yes.
The current fee is $60, as you know, and the fine for noncompliance is $100.
Okay. I will just note that I did speak with Henry Marafa yesterday on this matter, and he sent a note to all of us, I believe, saying that he would support keeping it at $60. But I'm going to open it up for the council to resolve what our fee should be.
Well, I've previously said a number of times that I am okay with keeping it at $60 as well. Seems reasonable. It was reasonable and workable previously before we had the whole issue of changing the ordinance and then changing it back. It amounts to $5 a month, which, when you think of it that way, doesn't seem too onerous. But as we talked about at our last discussion of this, I think making it too low sends the wrong signal. We did just review the survey results that show that our residents quite clearly think that there should be a meaningful distinction between what they pay for services and what non-residents pay for services, and I think that's understandable as a policy position. Again, I don't want to get to the point where we're creating too onerous a burden for the non-residents who want to use this facility, but I also think $60 is a fair amount, and anything lower than that, even though it's not a revenue generator for us, sends the wrong signal.
I agree. That's why I proposed the $5 a month. I don't even think that $10 a month is unreasonable, but I think $60 is a place where we've had it before, and I would support that.
Rob?
Well, you know my position. I would be at the lower end of the spectrum. I proposed $25 before, and for the reasons I had stated. I will note that we did receive a preliminary report from staff regarding some issues that were discussed at the prior public hearing, and the one that caught my eye was the I'm going to guess, non-scientific data that showed an estimate of 40 to 50% non-compliance. And again, one of my stated reasons for a lower fee is because it will induce people to in fact pay the fee. But there's other ways to do that, such as enforcement, and we also discussed, I think, the possibility of looking at access to the park as well. So my position is $25.
Neil?
Well, I was thinking $59.95. But
Neil, could you point the microphone toward you?
No, I don't really want to. I think that we have a general consensus. I think Rob makes very good points about trying to encourage compliance through lower fees, but I think our residents also think that non-residents should pay their freight. So I think at this point, without super compelling arguments on either side of this, we just leave well enough alone and leave the fee at $60 for the time being.
Would you like to make the motion?
Well, do we need to make a motion?
Well, you don't need to adopt the resolution because that's the current fee.
Yeah, it's the current fee.
Okay.
I move that we don't adopt the resolution.
I do not second that.
I'm glad to see that we don't need to, yes.
Okay. Then,
thank you.
We feel guided. Okay. Next, Greg Mann.
Good evening. Staff is before you tonight seeking a sponsorship of a text amendment to increase the maximum building height in the E1 zone. Staff has received a number of informal requests for development within the city, including within the E1 zone, which would be prohibited because of the current height restriction. It should be noted that currently the height restriction is 45 feet in the E1 zone, and that's also within the E2 zone because of cross-referencing. Also, it should be noted within that 45 feet that a newly constructed building, it wouldn't really, a four-story building wouldn't fit within that 45 feet currently. So currently you're looking in the E1 zone about three-story building usually. As such, this text amendment is proposing to increase the maximum building height in the E1 zone to permit a typical 6-story building. As mentioned in the provided attached memo and draft ordinance, staff had originally proposed to increase the maximum building height to 70 feet. Staff has recently received information that in reality, in order to facilitate the uses desired in the E1 zone, a typical 6-story building may need to be as high as 85 feet. With this new information, staff is seeking sponsorship to increase the maximum building height up to a maximum of 85 feet. Also, during the review of the E1 and E2 zones, staff has identified minor housekeeping items, including incorrect code references, cross-references, and staff is proposing to correct these with this amendment. Should the council choose to sponsor this amendment, staff is tentatively planning a joint public hearing during the Mayor and City Council regular session on March 21st, 2016.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the zoning map, looking for our E1s.
I'm guessing it's the red and purple blocks.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You know, sometimes...
That's right. You don't see them all the time the same way we see them.
Sometimes color blindness.
Color
hurts you.
deficient individuals sometimes have problems.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to say, any proposal to erect a building of this size would still be subject to planning commission approval and compatibility with the surrounding zone, adjacent zones, et cetera, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so it's not an automatic given that somebody can come in and say, I'm going to put up a seven-story building.
No, it's still up for the
They'll
planning
have to
commission
come
for
through.
review, yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
Are the E zones Euclidean zones, or are
They are
for-
Euclidean zones.
So wouldn't the 85 feet be as a matter of right?
It's a by right, but still, we require planning commission review for a new building. So we go
even-
through a normal process for review.
So legally, the planning commission could say no to it.
So they could say 40
They would need a finding.
Yeah,
They'd need a finding.
Based off the code, yeah, the health, safety, general welfare type of finding of why it's not compatible with the neighborhood or.
That's why I asked
Yeah.
Yes.
those issues,
But
is
it would still be-
compatibility and.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
purpose of the E1 zone is to be a concentrated employment zone, so I think it makes sense for the height restriction to be a little bit higher than it has been. And then the question of 70 versus 85 is really just a question of construction methods and standards for commercial versus residential, which also makes sense to me.
And there's also requirements in the code for setbacks. If it's certain distance from residential, it can't be higher than a certain amount as well, so.
Currently, there's not. We're proposing that there would be a larger setback if it buffered up on residential, on that yard, buffering the residential.
Do we need to include that in the language for this?
It's already included in the draft ordinance that was
In the
provided.
draft ordinance, okay. Then,
So do we need a motion to sponsor this? Okay.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Well, wait a minute. I just want to clarify, because the draft that's
This
in
is to
the...
introduce.
Yeah, I know, but are we introducing the version that has 70 feet or 85 feet? Because we need to introduce the version with 85 feet. So I think we might just need to clarify that for the motion introduced.
Yeah.
Is this really an introduction or is it a sponsoring?
It's sponsoring it.
So it's different. This is even before we get to an introduction. Or do we sponsor and then introduce?
No, it's akin to an introduction, but it's a little bit different process because of the planning commission component of it.
Do we need an amendment to the motion in order to include 85 feet?
Right,
here?
the document that's before us is
Document
before
that's
the
just an
changes that were just suggested.
That's correct. That's my
So
point.
the motion should reflect the 85 feet versus the
Right.
But
70
there are
that's
other
in the
changes
current
as
pack.
well, right?
No, that's the only change. That was
From the draft that's
from
in
the
front
draft,
of us.
yeah.
Okay, you want to
So-
withdraw the motion and do this
Oh,
again?
Just move
We
it.
can amend the motion.
So this is just
Yeah.
to open the record for discussion.
Correct.
I will
This is
move
to
a friendly
introduce the-
amendment to the motion that is before us.
I will accept your friendly amendment.
Wait, you haven't heard what it is yet.
Oh, I have an idea what it is, but go ahead, yes, I'm jumping to the gun here.
Yeah,
Too
right.
tall for
Yeah.
Friendly amendment to change the height restrictions in section 24-158 from 70 feet to 85 feet.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Say aye. Okay. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, none opposed. So that the amendment carries 4-0. Now we come
now we
back
have
to
amended.
the motion.
Motion
and we had
to sponsor,
Yes.
yes.
We had it. So we had the motion and we had the second.
It's a friendly amendment. I don't even know we had to.
Did we have to, Lynn?
It's fine.
Whatever.
I think we
We
had
should
to. So okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
As
Aye.
amended, aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 4-0. Thank you very much. Thanks, Greg. Okay, so now we have from the city attorney.
Just one thing very briefly. I wanted to thank the Employee Recognition Committee for the recognition tonight, but did want to stress that Lauren is really the workhorse of the elections, does a ton of work, but this is also a much bigger team effort. There are a number of departments involved, and would like to specifically recognize Britta Monaco and her team, who puts together a lot of ads and publications for the elections, the IT staff, who tests all the equipment. They show up at 5:30 election morning and stay till 9 o'clock that evening to ensure that all the equipment runs properly all day. And also the public works staff, particularly Bobby Johnson and his crew, who put up signs throughout the elections and also set up and tear down all of the polling places. So I think the team is much larger than the team that was recognized this evening.
Thank you for recognizing them. Anything else, Lynn?
No.
Anything from any other staff? I see Dennis coming up.
Just have one quick item. As my agreement with the architecture and engineering contract, we did issue a task order for a do not exceed amount of $15,000 to K2M Design for looking at the guardrails at the golf park.
Oh, at Boar Park?
Boar Park.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for letting us know.
The
Anything from
guardrails?
any other staff? Okay, not seeing anything. As I mentioned, we have work session next week with the 2 topics. Then the following week we have our planning retreat. So until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.